My name is Anna Lar. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, Psychotherapy Networker is all about creating change in therapy and inspiring therapists to do just that. We do it in our courses, we do it in the magazine, and now we're bringing it to you here in the social media space. If you want to check out our magazine and get an exclusive discount for a subscription, we will have some information for you to do just that during this session. Today is our first video in a series on creating change in the therapy room. Our host, Ron Taffel, is an expert in child psychology and chair of the board of directors of the Institute of Contemporary Psychotherapy. He is joined by his guest, fellow master clinician, Janina Fisher, expert on trauma treatment and author of her most recent book, Transforming the Living Legacy of Trauma. They will discuss what they believe is at the heart of change in therapy, and I will turn it right over to them to get started. Ron?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Anna. Hi, Janine.
Hi.
Janina. We had been speaking before a few weeks ago, and we were talking about meeting today. And I just want to tell everyone that this is an entirely unscripted conversation that we're having. And what it's about is that I was thinking and have been thinking for a long time, working with so many different people and running a clinic and training center and hearing just literally thousands of sessions and treatments reported that that much of what we do, that there are moments or treatments in which we end up doing things that are not quite in what we write. I've written a lot as well, and I find capturing those moments that are moments that or treatments that went in a direction that we weren't expecting, or a patient called for something from us that we weren't ready, or maybe we became ready to offer. That's what we wanted to talk about, and that's what I asked you about. And I just want to ask you if you have an example or something where something really worked, and what made it work.
Isn't that interesting? Because the case that came to mind is a case that didn't work and didn't work and didn't work and didn't work and didn't work, and then until I actually transformed something inside me.
Yes.
And it was it was very interesting, and I think about this a lot with very challenging clients that we often get inducted in to whatever system is going on, and we kind of can't get out of our own way.
Right. We're engaged in reenactments, and in a way that is really quite dramatic. We become the very person in their lives. In some way, we become transformed. I mean, this in some way that keeps repeating within the treatment until somehow one becomes aware of it. So, what happened with you? What changed?
Well, actually, now that I'm thinking about this case, a lot of things changed.
Hmm.
Um, this was a young woman in her mid-30s whom I had previously met because I did a consultation to her previous therapist because they had a rupture in their relationship, and I was asked to consult to both of them. And I knew from the conversation that this was a client who very easily got triggered by the therapist and erupted in rages, not just verbal
Yeah. No.
rages,
Yeah.
but someone who threw objects at the therapist, who would stalk out of the room and slam the door so that the building shook.
Hard
And
objects, Janina. Hard objects at the therapist.
I mean, not lethal, but
Still through objects. All right. Go ahead.
picking up a little bowl. You know how we therapists have coffee tables
Right.
with things on them. So, but not soft objects. because
Hmm.
a buy coffee table always had a Nerf ball on it.
That's all right. That's a
Things
different matter.
that people could fidget with.
Uh-huh.
So, but these were hard objects,
Hmm.
um, and really, needless to say, um, dysregulated the therapist so that she could hardly speak. So when this client came to me,
Hmm.
I was on one level, I was perfectly conscious of the challenges she faced and that I would face with her.
Hmm.
But something drew me in, because sometimes you get this sinking feeling,
Yeah.
and you kind of your gut knows
Something.
this is going to be hard.
Hmm. What drew you in? Do you know?
I think what drew me in was her intelligence and in a way her story, because she described having had to leave home at the age of 16,
Hmm.
the youngest of 5 children, scapegoated in a very abusive family where no one escaped a traumatic childhood. Um, and this intrigued me, that she had escaped from home by developing an eating disorder
Hmm.
and having to go to an eating disorders program.
Right.
And she never went home.
Right.
And so I was drawn, and she had put herself through college. So I saw her strengths, and she kept saying, I just need somebody who understands trauma. You probably know this, and I'm sure the people who are listening know. When someone touches you, when you get that feeling, um, this is someone who is hard to help, and most therapists would give up. In fact, she said, I've had 15 therapists, all of whom have terminated with me.
You talk about the re-traumatization of therapy and of treatment, being really turned away or rejected by 15 therapists. It's
Right.
enough for one or two. So go ahead. So what happened?
Absolutely. And I have these moments, I've learned to call them moments of hubris,
Hmm.
where I say, well, I wouldn't do that. I would be the therapist who hangs in there with her, and we get through it. So I said, Tuesday at 2:30 is free. I would be willing to see you. I think it was probably the second session when she got up, walked out the door of my office, and slammed the door so hard that again the building shook. And I knew that I was in trouble, because because if that continued and escalated,
Hmm.
I'd be in the position her former therapist was in.
Right.
So I did something that I've never done and I felt extremely uncomfortable with. I set rules. When she came back the next week, I said, I probably neglected to tell you that this is a practice devoted to the treatment of trauma, and we have certain requirements
Hmm.
because everyone has to feel safe here. Therefore, we can't have loud noises like doors slamming. Um, we can't have screaming at a level that would disturb other patients. And we can't engage in any type of activity that is likely to scare others. And so I need you to agree that no matter how angry you are, you won't slam the door. Um, you can raise your voice, but you will not scream and you will not throw things. And if you're willing, I can see you. Now, truthfully, I felt like a policeman. I thought, what kind of therapist would say, right? These are the rules. You
Yeah.
can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do the other. It was an extremely uncomfortable role.
Oh.
And I've never been a good limit setter. As a mother,
Mhm.
my kids still, they don't criticize me, but they tease me about how permissive I was
Mhm.
and how little structure I gave them back in the 70s when when we believed kids didn't need structure. So, so, so we proceeded. Every week she was furious, and every week she stalked out and slammed the door.
So let me just get this right. So what you did is you created a frame of expectations, and that I think we do a lot of times in therapy, but it isn't quite as explicit as what you did there.
Mhm.
And you're saying that every week then afterwards, she continued to do the same behavior. So what did our uh, permissive parent then do each time she did this? What happened the next session?
So in my new role as
Is that this?
therapy police,
That's right. Yeah.
I
So what did you do?
after each time she slammed the door,
Uh-huh.
I would call her phone, assuming she would not pick up if she was driving, and I would leave a message that said, in just the tone of voice, I want to remind you that I work in a practice devoted to the treatment of trauma, and we cannot allow our clients to slam doors or make noise that will potentially scare others. I just want to remind you of that. Click.
And did she ever pick up? Did you ever actually speak to? No.
And I hoped that she would not, because
Hmm?
I knew, I knew from her description of the previous 15 therapists who fired her, I knew that in those phone conversations, she would become angry, more than devaluing. She would get so angry and accusatory that
Hmm.
most therapists decided they
Right.
couldn't work with her. So for the first 3 months, I was a policeman, and that's all I did. I would listen. She would get furious with me because she didn't get the response she wanted. She would walk out, slam the door, and I would wait 5 minutes and then pick up the phone and again say, I want to remind you
Hmm.
that blah, blah, blah. I felt so hard and cold inside because this is not how I usually conduct therapy, right? Usually I feel open, I feel warm, I feel interested, and instead I felt like a soldier. And it was very uncomfortable, but it worked. So after probably 6 or 7 weeks of this, the door slamming stopped.
And during the time, Janine, when you were occupying that space, and when she was in the room with you, were you asking questions? Did you feel that you projected any of the empathy that I feel, even in the way that you speak now? Or did you feel guarded when you were with her? Do you remember what you felt like in the
Oh,
sessions?
I remember very well. Um, because this is how the sessions went. She would come in,
Hmm.
sit down, um, and she would say, what I want is a therapist who will hold me when I cry.
Mm,
And I of course said, oh, I'm terribly sorry. That's not how I work.
right.
Um, you have every you have every right to ask for what you want. Unfortunately, I can't provide that.
Mm-hmm.
And the next week, and she would be furious. Well, why can't you provide it? Right? If it's what I need and I'm the client, you should provide it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next week, I want a therapist who will hold me when I cry. Then it became, I want you to take me home.
Mm.
If you take me home, I'll be okay. I'm not okay now.
Right. So it was changing. It was, in a sense, it was the same, but it was changing. She was actually getting, in some way, connected to you. Now she wanted to take her home.
Right. So she was upping the ante.
Right.
And you're right. In retrospect,
Mm-hmm.
that was an indicator that she was more connected. Of course, what I felt, and I think that probably most of our listeners will understand, I felt more and more pushed away.
Mm.
Right? Right?
As it kept going on, yes.
And I remember I summoned myself to respond to, I need you to take me home. I tried to respond in such a gentle, empathic way. And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I would be breaking the law if I took you home." and well, that didn't help. So we proceeded. 90% of the focus of every therapy session was on what I wasn't doing or what I was doing wrong. And more and more, when that happens, when you become the focus
Mm-hmm.
as the therapist, and there's no possible way to discuss what's happening in the room.
Mm-hmm.
At least what happens to me is that I get much sort of frozen because anything I say is likely to create more conflict.
Right.
And I lose that empathic resonance because it's hard to, I've learned to say to clients,
Mm-hmm.
I can't empathize with your accusations. I can empathize with your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is my feeling. You're cold and uncaring.
She would say.
Oh, that was a very frequent complaint. And so one day so here I am, I'm frozen,
Uh-huh.
and sort of closed off.
Closed off, yeah. One day.
And one day I got angry, not just defensive, because I could feel the tension in my body. I was like, on guard, waiting for the attack. And I said to her from this kind of place in my core so I didn't feel that anger in the sense of, I felt anger in my core. And I said to her, caring is not in my job description. Being ethical is in my job description. Right. Being confident, being trained, being non-critical, all are in my job description. Caring is not in my job description.
How hard was that to say? Easy or hard?
Because I've had this sort of anger and energy in my core, it was easy.
At that moment.
Afterward, kind of my observing mind was saying, what did you say, Janina? How could you say caring is not in my job description? Right? What kind of therapist says that? But it actually had the effect of her not making that accusation every week. Other accusations, of course, but that accusation was done.
Jeannie, what do you think, what changed at that moment? What do you think happened by your being that transparent? When you said that to her, when it came out of your core, and you said that caring is, and you said it was some anger, or at least ethical principle, or transparency. What changed with her? Did you see anything shift?
What changed with her was she got quieter.
Mm,
And I think I think about this a lot because there's a term that that I use in my world called disruption,
yeah,
which means that we somehow disrupt the pattern, whatever
right.
system we're in, we disrupt it. It doesn't have to be dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it's very subtle. But when we disrupt the pattern, what I notice is it creates a little bit of space
Right.
for something different to happen.
That really resonates with my experience also. What I'm struck by is that you were able to continue to do this week to week. I don't know if you spoke about it with anyone. I don't know if you um, were in a peer supervision group, or whether you were sharing it with anybody to give yourself the strength to be able to do it then the next week. And I think those moments that you just described, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to start these conversations, that moment you reach down for something in yourself that is not really part of our the frame and who we are most of the time as therapists. But I found that just what you said, it creates, there's a term, and there's a certain kind of chafing and an opening, and it opens up the space for something new to happen. And
Right.
the thing about it is, you don't know where it's going to go when
Right. You don't know what's going to happen.
And that's
Right.
we have about 5 minutes or 4 minutes left, I think. So when you think about this, do you feel like what did you learn about yourself as a therapist?
What I learned was that I can be more authoritative, not authoritarian, but authoritative. That I can be more transparent, I think is the word you used.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And 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 I don't have to agree to the role to which I've been assigned.
Yeah. And what you did is that you didn't let yourself be transformed into a kind of a complete reenactment of what must have happened traumatically in this child's development. That you didn't let that happen, and you
Right.
stayed steady throughout, but in a way that you're not, or I would not be used to as well. We were not authoritarians with our children, also, and you um, you change that for yourself. It's almost like we rewrite our own narratives when we do
Yeah.
this work all the time.
Right. And then there was another shift about a year later
Mm,
when I was listening to the accusation du jour and I could feel my body tensing, right? I could feel, and I thought, oh, I realized I was more defensive than I realized. It was just somatic. And I thought, it doesn't help if I'm defending. And
mm,
I just relaxed my body. And she said, I researched your writings on the internet, and you say that you're available by phone to support people between sessions, and you don't do that with me. And I just started laughing because my body was relaxed. I started laughing. And I said, oh my God, I am such a nightmare for you.
that, oh
I
my
don't,
God, I'm such a nightmare for you.
yes,
Yes. And
I
what
am such a
happened?
nightmare for you.
Uh-huh.
I
And,
don't know how you stick with it week after week.
mm,
I literally couldn't stop laughing. Like, I'm like the therapist of your baddest dream,
Your worst nightmare as a
your
therapist.
worst nightmare. Uh,
Did she say
and
anything then, Janina? Do you remember what she said at that moment?
she started laughing.
She did. So you
She
laughed
started,
together.
and she said, "Yes, you are." And so we were both laughing about the fact that she was seeing a therapist who was her worst nightmare.
Well, I have to say that in being her worst nightmare, in a lot of different ways, I feel like um, you've and validated, taught me something and validated something, which is that in some way, I feel like she kept looking, not on purpose, but just kept looking for ways to really reasons to leave and reasons to be thrown out of therapy, and that you kept your ethical core,
Mhm.
critical and your ethical core throughout. And that was like a godsend for for how long did you work with her?
We worked together for a year, for 2.5 years.
Hmm.
And there were many times when I wanted to be one of those therapists who said,
One of the
"We're done."
15, yeah.
But, but, but I was glad. I was glad in the end.
Did you feel that you got, and this will be the last thing that I'll ask you, did you feel that you got to the point at which you could begin to talk in some way about the experience? Was that and about her past and the kinds of things you would want to get to also?
Very, very little.
Hmm.
Very little. But for her, very little was a lot.
It's a lot.
Right. So
Yeah.
I remember toward the end, she said to me, "You know, I still remember the day you said caring was not in your job description." and, and then she said, but, but I knew you did care, so I stayed.
Uh-huh. You see, that's, yeah, that's when you tell this, I can feel you're having cared with all the feelings that you had throughout the entire time that you're describing, and it just comes through even now. I don't know how many years ago this was. It's a long time.
Wow,
Yeah,
probably 10
but
years.
I can feel the caring. I think that but not the caring in the way that she was asking for it, and
Right.
right in a different way.
Mhm.
Well, this this went in a direction that we did not expect or plan for, much like the work that you're describing. But you have been far from our worst nightmare. This has been really. Uh, I think I've learned something in the way that you have been speaking, and I hope that other people have as well. As I said, we're trying to get to some. You said it, the core of some of the work that we do as
Mhm.
therapists and as human beings, and I really want to thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you for creating this opportunity. This was fun.
It was, and
Yeah.
we'll speak together again.
Good, good.
Bye
And
bye.
thank you, Anna, too. Thanks.
Thanks for
Yes, thank you
this
both so
episode.
much. This was wonderful. I have such a smile on my face. Thank you both so much for this amazing discussion, and thank you all for attending. We had some great questions in the chat that we didn't get to, so I apologize for that. We hope you enjoyed your time here. Be sure to check out the link that was put in the chat where you can get some free bonus content from Janina, and also an exclusive discount for the magazine, just $10 for the whole year. Which is really awesome. And we will be back here next month. So please check out your feed for our next upcoming event on what makes change. Thank you all.
Thank you.